Thank you to the Hudson Historical Society for having me this evening. Tonight we're going to have a discussion about the sacrifice that the men from Hudson made during the Second World War. So this isn't going to be a discussion about World War II. We're going to just skim the wave tops about some of the facts of the Second World War, but this is about the individuals from here that made that ultimate sacrifice. You'll see on the list that it's all men. I will say that many women from Hudson did serve, but there were no women that died in the service. And you'll also notice that the list that many of you have, there's a lot of names that you may not be familiar with. So my mantra with this entire project is by birth, by life, or by death. So someone that may have been born in Hudson and moved away, someone that lived in Hudson but wasn't born here, and someone that may have family connections and be buried here. And that's kind of the mantra I use for the Marlborough project. I started that in 2011 while I was stationed in Italy. I went to the Anzio Nettuno War Cemetery, and I was interested in the men from Marlborough that were buried there. And that has, I think snowball is a negative word, but it's snowballed into a really great project to remember them. And while I was doing that, I realized that every time I would, do a little search for Marlborough, there was always connections to Hudson. I went to high school here in Hudson at the Rite Aid, which is now used to be Hudson Catholic. So I do feel a connection to Hudson, and I thought it was important to tell these men's stories. So if any of you have been to any of my talks before, one thing I do like to do is if there's any veterans in the crowd, if you'd like to be stand up and recognized. I believe we have a World War II veteran with us tonight. Give him a round of applause. Yeah, you don't have to stand. All right, so I do have 100 slides to get through, so we're gonna kick this off pretty quick. We'll hold all questions till the end, and we also have some displays here. I have some photographs. I have gotten in touch with a lot of the families. Are there any families tonight that are related to any of the men? All right, so Judy, your brother Donald, will be seeing his photo and learn a little bit about his sacrifice. So thank you for coming. Thank you for all you've done to highlight his service and the photographs you've provided. So we have some photographs up here. You can come take a look. My basement or my garage I have a lot of photographs. That's kind of like my home base. But all my research, everything I've been able to find will be donated to the Hudson Historical Society so that this can kind of stay for future generations. All right, so we're gonna get right into it. Next slide. All right, so World War II, the lead up to World War II is just a brief overview. Next slide. So 18 September 1931, Japan invades Manchuria. Next slide. May 1936, Italy invades and annexes Ethiopia. I thought that was a little interesting. Next slide. 1st of November 1935, the Rome-Berlin Axis is announced. A little blurry in the bottom, but you have Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler, both fascists. So the rise of fascism was obviously something that happened also in Spain with Franco. Next slide. 25 November 1936, Germany and Japan said that anti-Comintern pact. This is against the Soviet Union. Next slide. 7 July 1937, Japan invades China. Next slide. 13 March 1938, Germany incorporates Austria. This is known as the Anschluss. Next slide. 29 September 1938, the Czechoslovak Republic cedes the Sudetenland to Germany. They were German-speaking people in Czechoslovakia. That sounds a little familiar with what's going on in Ukraine right now, right? Russian-speaking people. So, next slide. 15. Whoop. That's all right. 15 April 1939, Italy annexes Albania. Next slide. 23 August 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union sign a non-aggression pact. That didn't last long. The 1st of September 1939, Germany invades Poland. And the next slide. Oh, come back. So from September 1939 to December 1941, conflict continues to grow and bring all of mainland Europe into the fold. Poland is broken up by the Soviet Union and Germany. The Soviet Union invades Finland. Germany invades Norway and Denmark, and eventually France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. The Soviet Union further invades Romania, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Great Britain defeats Germany in the air war known as the Battle of Britain. Italy invades Egypt, Greece, and the Axis powers together invade Yugoslavia. So from what we've seen until now, until December 1941, there was a lot going on in the world. Next slide. 7 December 1941, Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. So this is the day that will live in infamy, and this is when America gets involved in the war. From 7 January 1942 to 9 April 1942, the Battle of Bataan, Battle of Corregidor. So the troops that were left behind in the Philippines were fighting a last-ditch battle against Japanese as they invaded. And they estimate that the Bataan Death March, between 5,000 and 18,000 American and Filipino soldiers were killed or died from lack of basic care by the hands of the Japanese. Next slide. So the first man we'll be talking about tonight is Stephen Kiartianis. He's a machinist mate first class. He enlisted in 1934, so he'd been in the Navy for close to 10 years. And he was aboard the USS Houston when she was sunk in the Battle of the Sunda Strait, the 1st of March, 1942. So he's the first man from Hudson to die. At that time, no one knew what happened to the Houston. The Sunda Strait is between Sumatra and Java. It's a not as well-known strait to transit, and no one knew what happened. So Stephen had been serving for almost a decade in the Navy and served on multiple ships, including the USS Cayuma, USS Perry, and USS Southard. He was a very experienced swimmer and won multiple awards for swimming against other sailors in the fleet. The fate of the Houston remained a mystery for some time until word from POW camps in Japan confirmed survivors of the ship and their story. So when the family found out about that, they were convinced that he survived because he was such a good swimmer. But unfortunately, being a machinist mate, he was below decks in the engine rooms, and the chance of him surviving that first contact were not good. So we'll take a pause real quick. You'll see here at the bottom, a little blurry, but each of the men, I went through and find what medals they would have been awarded and kind of highlighted it here. Everyone is individualized. I tried to make these little stories individual for each man, to kind of highlight that they were individual people. So you can see, thank you there. So, a number of awards, Presidential Unit Citation for the Navy. He was in the military before Pearl Harbor. So in your packets, there's a couple, 3 pages that are stapled together, and that will kind of go through different awards, medals, and the like. You can kind of match up the colors if you like. Can everyone see the photograph? The photograph to me is the most important piece. We can read the name of the monument, but all right. Next slide. So the 7th of August, 1942, United States forces land on Guadalcanal. Next slide. The Navy really had a rough time of it during Battle of Guadalcanal and the fighting around that island. So Maurice Crowell, Seaman Second Class, he enlisted the 20th of December, 1941, and he was aboard USS Vincennes, a heavy cruiser. He was killed in action the 9th of August, 1944 at the Battle of Savo Island. So Maurice was recognized as one of the first men from Hudson to enlist after the attack on Pearl Harbor. And the Battle of Savo Island was the first of many naval battles in the waters near Guadalcanal. They named it Iron Bottom Sound because so many ships were sunk near there.
Matt, how old was he?
Very young.
Yeah.
Yeah. USS Vincennes, USS Astoria, USS Quincy, all United States heavy cruisers, and the HMAS Canberra, Australian heavy cruiser, were sunk during the Battle of Savo Island with the loss of over 1,000 men. So in one night, 1,000 men were killed fighting the Japanese. But they were able to turn the Japanese away from attacking the landing beaches. Next slide. So here's a name that you may not be familiar with. Francis Keegan lived in Hudson as a young man, but he is not on the monument. He was a chief yeoman, and he enlisted the 19th of June, 1919. So he'd been in the Navy. I mean, he could have retired by the time the war broke out. He was aboard USS Astoria, another heavy cruiser. He was killed in action again at the Battle of Savo Island. So Francis lived in Hudson as a young man before moving to Medford and then enlisting in the Navy. He served on numerous ships, including the USS Kanawha, USS Connecticut, USS Kingfisher, USS California, USS Mayopic, USS Mississippi, USS Sacramento, and USS Oklahoma. Wow. So he's an experienced sailor. And his family was very gracious to fill in the photographs. I really like some of the photos they shared. So many of the men and many of the slides, I only can have room for one photo, but there are, I have a lot of photographs, and I really think the photographs really help tell that story. Next slide. On the 8th of November, 1942, Allied forces landed in Algeria and Morocco in French North Africa. The interesting part about this is we were fighting the French. I always found that interesting. We were fighting the Vichy French that had aligned themselves with the Nazis. So if you ever seen the movie The Big Red One, I love that movie. But they were fighting the French when they landed in North Africa. Next slide. So Robert Bryan. Robert was a private. He enlisted in May 1942, and he served in the 344th Engineer General Service Regiment. And he died in non-battle on the 24th of May 1943. So Robert was a resident of Berlin, but he was a 1934 graduate of Hudson High School, and that's why I included him. And he also graduated from the Springfield Agricultural College. So I believe something related to his degree is why he was in the engineering unit, and he died in North Africa. Still doing a little bit of research on Robert. Next slide. Thomas Bartlett, the second lieutenant, commissioned in 1942 with the 2nd Anti-Submarine Squadron, and he was killed in action the 20th of September 1943. So he was awarded a Distinguished Flying Cross. So these awards down here, Distinguished Flying Cross and an Air Medal, are kind of prestigious awards for airmen to receive for different missions that they have served in.
Was he born in Berlin?
Yes, yep,
Yes, I
Yep.
know the name.
yep.
Oh,
So I believe, so he had a son that he left behind. He was a resident of Berlin and again, a Hudson High School graduate. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for sinking a German submarine west of Portugal on the 8th of July, 1943. And he was killed in action while attacking German submarines in the Mediterranean. So I will say that America won World War II based on logistics. Our ability to resupply our troops was what propelled us and allowed us to win that war. To knock out submarines was key at the beginning of the war. And that's what the 2nd Anti-Submarine Squadron would do. So I can't imagine, like I've sailed all around the world, to be able to spot a submarine from an airplane seems insane to me. And then to be able to sink it. So that's pretty amazing. Next slide. On the 10th of July, 1943, Operation Husky, the Allied landings on Sicily. Next slide. So here's again a man many of you may not recognize, Henry Krogan. He was a radioman 3rd class, enlisted in October 1943, and he was killed aboard USS Rowan, the 11th of September 1943. My dates may be wrong there on his enlistment. But Henry was born in Hudson, and that's why he was included. He was raised as a foster child in Burlington, Massachusetts. And he was sunk by a German E-boat while supporting the landings at Sicily. When we think of the PT-109, John F. Kennedy, the small boats, the Germans had the same, and they were able to sink a destroyer. So you'll see here the different designations on the Navy ships mean different things. So DD is a destroyer. You'll see DE, destroyer escort, BB, battleship, different things. But a destroyer is a pretty decent sized ship. We're talking 400 or 500 feet there. So and probably close to 200 men. So this is the only photo I've ever been able to find of Henry as a foster child. There wasn't a lot to go on to try to reach out to his family, but I'm very happy that we were able to recognize him. Next slide. On the 9th of September 1943, Operation Avalanche was the landings on mainland Italy and Salerno, southern Italy. Next slide. Thomas Mays, we were just talking about this, corporal. He enlisted the 25th of February 1941, and he served in the 1st Canadian Light Anti-Aircraft Battalion. He's killed in action the 24th of September 1943. So Henry Thomas he enlisted while living in Canada and previously served in the Canadian equivalent of the Army National Guard, and he left behind a wife and daughter in England. He was killed in action while fighting against the Germans at the Gothic line near Monte Cassino. I've been to Monte Cassino, and when you stand in Monte Cassino proper and look up at the mountain where the Germans have their entrenchments and where they were telling the artillery to come from, it's amazing what these men went through on the front lines. Next slide. So with the stalemate at the Gothic line and the Allies are stuck there, the Polish troops were the ones that actually liberated or took over Monte Cassino. That's very famous, very prideful thing for the Poles. The idea was to hop up the coast with an amphibious landing to bypass the Germans and hopefully get them to pull back. So on the 22nd of January 1944, Operation Shingle, the Allied landings at Anzio. So it's a little special for me because this is kind of where my whole research, everything I've tried to understand and better bring out to folks, this is kind of all where it started. Anzio now, the beach looks just like that, but the town doesn't. So Anzio now, I mean, this is like the Italian Riviera. It's beautiful all along that southern coast. Next slide. Herbert Charles. Again, this is the only photo from the Hudson newspaper at the time. I'm really happy that Hudson chose to get their newspaper, the Daily Sun, put on the internet to make it searchable through the public library. That to me was just extremely helpful. But Herbert was a private. He enlisted before the war started in 1941, and he was with the 68th Coastal Artillery Regiment, and he was killed in action right after the landings in the 29th of January 1944. So Charles worked at the Hudson Worsted Company before enlisting. He was killed in action at the beachhead during a German air attack. So the landings at Anzio became a really big stalemate. When we landed, we were able to get jeeps and some troops almost all the way to Rome, and they got nervous that they were going to get cut off and turned back. So if we had just pushed that, but there was thought process that we were gonna get into some trouble. This was a pretty big stalemate. Next slide. Kenneth Carlisle. So here's an Army slide. You'll see here at the bottom. This is his regimental patch, and this is his divisional patch. Kenneth Carlisle was a private first class. He enlisted in June 43. He was with the 141st Infantry Regiment of the 36th Infantry Division, and he was killed in action the 25th of May, 1944. So Kenneth was originally from Maine, and he married Margaret Gillison and lived with his father on Pope Street and worked at the LaPointe Machine Tool Company before enlisting in Brewer, Maine. And he was with the 36th during intense fighting at the Gary River. So the 36th, the T-Patchers, this was a Texas National Guard unit. And so many men were from Texas. And they took a lot of the brunt of the fighting in Italy. The Rapido River crossing, fighting along many places. San Pietro and Fine, which was a famous movie at the time, all about them fighting there. So I'll take a pause real quick. So when it comes to how I'm finding out this information, a lot of it is just first source documents. So documents, military records become public after a certain amount of time. So 62 years. I don't know why it's 62, but that's the number. But after 62 years, these become public record. Like my military record will become public after 62 years. And someone will look up my stuff maybe. But
And what's your name?
so for the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard, the Merchant Marine, all those records, I can get their full service file. So for Henry Krogan, the full record, everything. For Army and Army Air Corps, there were, in 1973, there was a fire at the National Archives. There were 17 million records that were burned.
Oh,
So the majority of Army records are really difficult to come by. That being said, researching men that died in the service, the individual deceased personnel files, the records of how they died and a little bit about that, were in a different building. So I've been able to go through an archivist that works in St. Louis and get those. And they tell a whole lot about some of these men that I don't have a lot of information on. I wasn't able to get in touch with their families. Luckily, Kenneth's fiance, or his wife at the time, remarried, and the granddaughter lives in Marlboro and is on the Marlboro Historical Society. So she has pictures of her grandmother with Ken in Maine. They have the whole high school yearbook graduation photo and stuff. She was upset after the war ended and threw all the photos of him out. But there were a few that made it through. So, you know, these people all had families, and it's kind of, you know, you got to remember that they left loved ones behind as well. Next slide. John Connolly was a private. He enlisted in October, 337th Infantry Regiment of the 85th Infantry Division. He was killed in action on the 4th of June, 1944. So sometimes with the Italian campaign, the men that fought it were a little bit disheartened because after D-Day, they kind of felt they were forgotten about fighting in Italy still. John worked at the Hudson Worsted Company and married Marlboro girl Anne Falcone, and he participated in intense fighting against German lines south of Rome. He was killed in action shortly after passing through the capital. Next slide. So 1939 to 1945, the Battle of the Atlantic. You can see photos here. This is probably a destroyer escort, or a minesweep launching depth charges out of German submarines. And you can see in the back, the little dots are all merchant ships. So the Merchant Marine had the second highest casualty rate in the war. They would send these ships out. They were unarmed, and they would have to get supplies overseas. There were ways that we could counter that. Like we saw the second anti-submarine squadron. We could bomb the submarines at sea. Also putting Navy armed guard on board. So next slide. So John Brothers was a coxswain. He enlisted in August 1942, and he was aboard the SS SO Gettysburg, and he was killed in action the 10th of June 1943. The ship was torpedoed, and the entire crew and the armed guard were all killed. So John enlisted while still a sophomore at Hudson High School. So keep that in mind. A sophomore at high school enlisting. He served as a member of an armed guard team, United States Navy gunners assigned to merchant vessels to protect against aircraft and U-boats. There's a lot of stuff in the Hudson Historical Society from his yearbook that they knew he went, and they still honored him. There's a picture of him in his football uniform. But probably one of the youngest. And we'll see that not all of these men were very young. We'll get to that a little later. Next slide. Bernard Lyle Jr., Chief Aviation Machinist Mate. He enlisted in November 1944. He was with Patrol Bombing Squadron 209. He was killed in action in July of 1944. So Bunny Lyle was a longtime mechanic at the Marlboro and Grafton airports, and he specialized in aircraft maintenance. And he taught at the Naval Air Technical School in Memphis, Tennessee. And he was lost at sea in the Caribbean while attempting to locate a German U-boat, and he left behind a wife and young son. Next slide. So Victor Peristeri was a pharmacist mate third class. He enlisted in September 43 and was lost on board USS Warrington, another destroyer. So we're talking a couple hundred men when the ship went down. They sailed into a hurricane. So today that seems like a little crazy to us to do that, right? We know about the El Faro a couple of years ago that did sail into a hurricane. They were all lost. During wartime, these things sometimes have to happen for us to be able to fight the enemy. So Victor was a former Hudson resident. He was living in Worcester. This photo is actually from the Norton Company book. They had someone commission charcoal paintings of every single man that worked at Norton Company that died in the war, and then they gave these to the families. I thought that was really nice. Former Hudson resident, participated in the landings at Normandy as part of the crew of landing ship Tank 336. And the Warrington was lost off the coast of Florida on a hurricane. Next slide. So the 6th of June, 1944, Operation Overlord, the Allied landings at Normandy. So, I mean, many of you seen Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers with the 101st Airborne. So that's kind of what we're talking about. Next slide. Joseph Noon was a technician, 3rd grade. He enlisted in October 1942, and he served in the 330th Infantry Regiment of the 83rd Infantry Division. And he died of wounds the 5th of July, 1944. Joseph was a Hudson High School graduate in the class of 1939 and a 1942 graduate of the Massachusetts College of Osteopathy in Boston. And he was actually awarded a scholarship to Harvard, which he turned down prior to enlisting. He graduated at the U.S. Army Medical School for technicians and surgeons. And wounds received while attacking, he died of wounds received while attacking positions near Carentan, France. So that's right outside of Normandy as we try to establish that beachhead. Next slide. Francis Benedetti was a staff sergeant. He enlisted in October 1940. So he was one of the 181, the 181st Infantry Regiment. I think tank company was from the Hudson National Guard, the Hudson Armory. He was the 359th Infantry Regiment of the 90th Infantry Division, and he was killed in action the 9th of July, 1944. So Francis was a member of the Hudson National Guard. He married Helen Malloy of Framingham, and he was killed in action while engaging German troops near Forêt de Montcastre in France. So from the 15th of June, 1944 to the 9th of July, 1944, the Battle of Saipan. So we're going to shift a little between the two fronts, Japan, Germany. The island hopping campaign in the Pacific was a way to not only bypass major defensive positions the Japanese had. Rabaul was like a fortress. There was no way we were ever going to take Rabaul. So we just bypassed it and went around it and let the grapes wither on the vine. They can't get food, they can't get supplies, then they're not a threat anymore. So many island battles, Guam, Bougainville, New Britain, New Ireland, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Saipan, Tinian. There's a lot of big battles, a lot of little battles that you hear about when it comes to the Pacific War. Next slide. So Edward Queen, platoon sergeant, he enlisted the 11th of June, 1940. He served in the 6th Marine Regiment of the 2nd Marine Division. He was killed in action the 17th of June, 1944. So he was on Saipan for 2 days. I spent 4 months on Saipan, and it's really amazing that you can still go to these places and see the battles and see where this happened. Edward was at one time a Portuguese translator for the U.S. Embassy in Brazil. It was filmed in combat for the movie With the Marines at Tarawa, being recognized by many local residents, and he was killed in action on Saipan. So with the Marines at Tarawa, there were embedded combat photographers that went with the troops, and they filmed the Battle of Tarawa, which was one of a bloodletting for the Marines. They thought they would be able to get on shore, and they were stuck very far offshore and had to wade in to fight the Japanese. When they put that in the movies, and people in Hudson went and looked at it, they said, that's Eddie Queen. And they recognized him. I really thought it was cool. He was a Portuguese translator. Obviously, Hudson has a distinct history with the Portuguese, and I thought it was neat that he spent some time down in Brazil translating. So he was awarded a Silver Star, and my friend Alicia is going to read the Silver Star citation for I try to find the citations as I get them. Some of them we have, some of them we don't.
President of the United States of America takes pride in presenting the Silver Star to Platoon Sergeant Edward J. Queen, United States Marine Corps, for suspicious conspicuous gallantry in interpreted while serving with the 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines, 2nd Marine Division during action against enemy evacuation. Despite serious wounds received during the initial landing with our assault units on D-Day, Platoon Sergeant Queen fearlessly carried on the face of terrific enemy artillery and mortar machine gun fire, subsequently assuming command of his platoon when the leader was wounded and evacuated. He constantly exposed himself to the enemy's fierce barrage and ascertain the location of Japanese emplacements and led his men in effective attacks against them. Under his determined leadership, Platoon Sergeant Queen's platoon advanced rapidly inland despite the bitter resistance and contributed to the successful establishment of the beachhead. Again, leading an intensive assault against strongly fortified hostile emplacement. Later the same day, he was fatally struck down while carrying out his hazardous mission. His daring aggressiveness, valiant fighting spirit, and cool courage in the face of tremendous odds were essential factors in the success of our forces capturing this vital hostile stronghold and reflect the highest credit on Platoon Sergeant Queen and the United States Naval Service. He gallantly gave his life for his country. General Orders, Commander-in-Chief, Pacific, Serial 768.
Thank you. So the Silver Star is the 3rd highest award for bravery. And this is something that he earned on Saipan. Next slide. So the 15th of August, 1944, Operation Dragoon, the Allied landings in southern France. So we think of southern France, Nice, Cannes, the French Riviera. It's beautiful for anyone that's been. But we landed there. The ship I was on in Italy, every year we went to Tio-Sumar outside Cannes, and the French remember the sacrifices Americans made. They were on the beach with Willys Jeeps and in World War II uniforms, and there were a bunch of French girls dressed as nurses, and they had an ambulance, and every year we would go to remember that landing, and the French remember. I just wanted to point that out. Next slide. Richard Atwood was a private first class, enlisted in March of 41. He was with the 15th Armored Infantry Battalion, the 5th Armored Division. He was killed in action in September of 1944. He was a Bolton resident, but a Hudson High School graduate of class of 1936. He was killed in action near Compiègne, France, while crossing a river. Next slide. So here's one that you may not recognize that isn't on the monument. Walter Enos, he was a first lieutenant. He actually enlisted. I'm still trying to find out if he had a battlefield commission or if he went to OCS. He served in the 10th Infantry Regiment of the 5th Infantry Division. He was killed in action the 20th of September, 1944. Walter was born in Hudson, but he was raised in Akron, Ohio. He's very talented, and he taught and coached at Kenmore High School in Akron. He's killed in action while fighting near Metz, France. He coached basketball. It was a big hit, I think, not only for the community, but for his students as well. Next slide. Maurice Zwicker, private. He enlisted in 43 with the 314th Infantry Regiment of the 79th Infantry Division. He was killed in action the 23rd of September, 1944. So another Berlin resident, but he was a Hudson High School graduate with the class of 1943. And he was killed in action after crossing the Meurthe River. So you're going to hear, as we go through France and we go through the other European fighting, a lot of crossing rivers. So the drive was to go to Germany, and to get there, you have to cross any obstacles. The rivers, the beachheads, or the bridges over those rivers were extremely important, and that's where a lot of the battles happened. Next slide. Michael Kaliniak was a private. He enlisted in April of 43. He was with the 104th Infantry Regiment of the 26th Infantry Division, and he was killed in action the 22nd of October, 1944. So you'll notice the 26th Infantry Division, the Yankee Division, this is Massachusetts. This is our National Guard. So a lot of men from the Yankee division were from our area, and that's a source of pride. Michael, according to his family, was legally blind in one eye, but he memorized the eye chart to be able to enlist. I thought that was amazing and showed his commitment to serve. And he was killed in action while fighting at the Battle of Montcourt Woods. I got in touch with his niece, and she has a lot of stuff, a ton of photos. She shared a lot, and it was interesting reading about the Battle of Montcourt Woods. And one of the first-hand accounts was basically saying that their officers got them killed. And it didn't need to happen. Next slide. Harry Bosselman was a private, enlisted 8th of March 1944. He was with the 317th Infantry Regiment, the 80th Infantry Division, and he was killed in action in November of 44. Harry was a Berlin resident, but a Hudson High School graduate of class of 1925. So earlier we talked about John Brothers enlisting as a sophomore, and now we have Harry Bosselman enlisting when he graduated high school almost 20 years before the war. So I always thought that was interesting. We hear of the young men that went away, but it wasn't always the young men. There were men from all facets of life that served. He was killed in action while securing the bridgehead across the Sail River, and he left behind a wife and 3 children. I do have photos here of Harry, other photos, and there's a photo of him with his children. The Berlin Historical Society has a great source of photos for a lot of these men, so they did share some of these. His grandkids shared some as well. Next slide. Jose Nees, sergeant, enlisted before the war in March of 41. He served in the 181 and then with the 104th Infantry Regiment of the 26th Infantry Division. And he's killed in action in November of 1944. He was born in Portugal, so we talked about the Portuguese connection here in Hudson. And he enlisted in the Army before the United States entered the war. He was killed in action while the division attacked German positions near the Saar River. So again, we hear the rivers, and that's how the battles were fought. Next slide. Joseph Doyle, private. He was enlisted in January of 44 with the 115th Infantry Regiment of the 29th Infantry Division. He was killed in action the 19th of November 1944. So one thing I'd like to point out, and I didn't highlight that here just to make it easy, but easier for me to do this, but he enlisted, right? If he's enlisting this late in war, he had 4 kids. He had 4 young children when he enlisted. So I didn't go through and find who was enlisted and who was drafted, right? I just put enlisted. But many of these men were drafted. Harry Bosselman, I believe, was drafted. I believe Joseph Doyle was drafted. These men had families in what the country needed them, and they were sent to war. So Joseph was born and raised in Hudson and worked in Natick and was a father of 4. And he was killed in action while the division advanced towards the Roar River. His 2 of his sons are still alive, and they had some really kind of gut-wrenching photos of like him holding them and before he went away. Next slide. Ronald Souza was a private. He enlisted in February 1942 with the 18th Infantry Regiment of the 1st Infantry Division. He was killed in action the 23rd of November 1944. So when we talk about D-Day and we talk the movie Saving Private Ryan, that was the 29th Infantry Regiment, 29th Infantry Division. The 1st Infantry Division was right next to them on Omaha Beach. When we think of that opening scene of how bloody that battle was on Omaha Beach, the 1st Infantry Division was right there. Red fought through, the 1st Infantry Division landed in North Africa. They then landed in Sicily. They then landed in Normandy, and they fought all the way through to Czechoslovakia. Yep, Battle of the Bulge, the Hurtgen Forest. Yep, the 1st Infantry Division was in the thick of it. He was awarded a Bronze Star for bravery during the landings on Omaha Beach. So he was recognized for his service on Omaha Beach. And he was killed in action while fighting in the Hurtgen Forest. So that was a very, like a stalemate in the forest fighting the Germans. There's some newspaper articles I found that said that he was actually captured by the Germans and somehow escaped. Still trying to dig a little bit deeper into that. Next slide. Joseph Buffard, private 1st class. He enlisted in February of 44 with the 262nd Infantry Regiment of the 66th Infantry Division. And he was killed in action on Christmas Day of 1944. So he was raised in Hudson, but was living in Marlborough when he enlisted. And interestingly enough, I wasn't around when these monuments went up, but he's listed on both Marlborough and Hudson. I found that to be interesting. He was one of 763 men killed when the SS Leopoldville was torpedoed and sunk in Cherbourg Harbor. They were torpedoed on Christmas Eve, and everyone was out at Christmas. They didn't think the Germans were going to do anything on Christmas. So when you think of being on a ship and then having to go in the water on Christmas, like a lot of these men died from hypothermia. There was nothing coming out to save them. Next slide. Joseph Alexandrovich, also with this 262nd Infantry Regiment and 66th Infantry Division. He enlisted a little earlier in the war. Of all the men that I've researched, his is the only personnel file that I've received that didn't get burned in that fire I told you about. So it's really interesting. He was with an anti-aircraft unit in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. I think he got in some trouble for being AWOL, which a number of men did, and he's also killed in action with the Leopoldville. The SS Leopoldville was torpedoed in Cherbourg Harbor late on Christmas Eve. Help was not fast in coming due to the holiday, leading to the deaths of many men in the frigid water. And Joseph's body was one of only a handful to be recovered. So Joseph Pouffard's body was not recovered. There's a number of men that are on the monument missing because of that. Next slide. So military is a profession of arms. That means that the training cycle that is involved with that it can be just as dangerous as fighting the war itself. So we'll talk about the home front. Next slide. Henry Chandler Tucker was a chief yeoman. Look at the date he enlisted, 1897. This man was 62 when he died. So he enlisted in 1897, and he was at the Naval Receiving Station in Boston, Massachusetts. And he died of a heart attack in September of 1942. So he was born in the 1870s, and he was recalled to active duty. So he was a veteran in both the Spanish-American War and World War I, and he was known to many in Hudson, and was at one time the commander of your American Legion post here in town. With the outbreak of the war, he's recalled to active duty from the retired reserve list, and he died of a heart attack. So, again, like we always think of the young men that died and served, but there were men from all kinds of walks of life there. Next slide. Herbert Sprague, the technical sergeant, enlisted in October 1941 and served in the 327th Army Air Force's base unit, and he died in an airplane crash in May of 1944. You can see here he was awarded 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses. So he was in Europe and he was fighting against the Germans very early in the war. And those bombing missions, before we kind of figured out how to bomb without obtaining so many casualties, was critical there. So he was a radio gunner aboard a B-17 aircraft at the 407th Bombardment Squadron of the 92nd Bombardment Group, awarded 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses. And he was actually shot down in the English Channel. So his airplane crashed in the English Channel, and he was rescued along with the rest of his crew. And he was wounded while that happened and was repatriated to the States. And then he was an instructor at MacDill Air Force Base. And sadly, the airplane crashed. Like we talked about, these training incidents can be dangerous as well, and he was the only casualty. Next slide. Henry LaFrance was a major, enlisted in 1919. So another man that had been in the military for close to over 20 years. And he was working at Amarillo Army Airfield with the Corps of Engineers. This is the Army Corps of Engineers insignia. And he died from complications to a vehicle crash in November 1944. Henry was a World War I veteran and a graduate at Norwich University. So there's actually, I don't have a whole lot of pictures of Henry from his time during World War II, but there's a lot of photos from the Norwich War War, which is like their yearbook. So it's kind of interesting seeing him when he was, a young man. Next slide. John Souza, private first class, he enlisted in March of 42. He died in a training accident in November of 44. John was a resident of Cambridge, and he married Rose Mora from Hudson. And he died in a training accident at Camp Gordon in Georgia. I believe, from what I've been able to discern, it was an accident with a hand grenade. Next slide. Sixton Lindquist was a corporal. He enlisted in October of 42, and he's with the 4,000th Army Air Force's base unit. And he died of disease in a military hospital in January of 45. So another name you might not recognize, but he's a former Hudson resident.
Lindquist.
Yeah. So I'm hoping he isn't on my list yet, or I haven't made it to him yet, but he will be one of the ones I hope to locate a photo for. Next slide. So the air offensive over Europe. So I don't know if folks saw the Masters of the Air, the new Band of Brothers that was on HUD-TV. I highly suggest it. I thought it was really good, really well done. But we're talking about the strategic bombing missions of in Europe. Next slide. Joseph Welch was a sergeant. He enlisted in July of 42 with the 338th Bombardment Squadron and the 96th Bombardment Group. He was killed in action on New Year's Eve of 1943. So Joseph was a B-17, that's the B-17 Flying Fortress. He was a gunner, and he was killed in a bombing mission near Paris, France. Next slide. So I really am happy that Judy's here tonight to recognize her brother. And this is Donald Wright, who's a staff sergeant. He enlisted in 18 December 1942. And he served with the 735th Bombardment Squadron and the 435th Bombardment Group. He was killed in action the 6th of March 1944. And I brought a lot of photos of Donald here on the table. People would like to take a look. He was on a B-24 Liberator, the Lily Bell. So that, I like that they all named their aircraft. And he served as a gunner. It was struck by anti-aircraft fire and crashed into the North Sea. Obviously, March is not the warmest of months, as we know right now. So crashing into the ocean is not a good thing. Was it the pilot or the co-pilot that survived?
No, it was the navigator.
The navigator. So the navigator survived, and he was from Brewer, Maine, and so he was able to relay some of the information about what happened. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Judy?
No, just that fellow went back and flew again after he had been injured in the crash.
Oh, that's amazing to survive that and then go back and do it again. Yep.
I really, really appreciate you doing this.
Yep.
Cool job.
Son and daughter are here as well.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next slide. Robert Giuliani, a first lieutenant. He was commissioned in July of 43. He was with the 544th Army Air Force's base unit, and he died in an airplane crash the 30th of August of 44. Right? We trained men to fly aircraft. We trained them to bomb, to be gunners, to be radio men on board the aircraft. Those aircraft that go out and come back in pieces or don't come back at all need to be replenished. So this symbol here, the Air Transport Command, was a way for them to have guys that all they did was ferry aircraft, bring them over to Europe. Robert was with the ferry command, and it was a crash in England, and he entered the service while studying at Northeastern. So there are a number of these men that were studying in college, or they gave up college to be able to go into the service. Next slide. Richard Vedetta was the first lieutenant. He was commissioned in January 44, the 319th Fighter Squadron of the 325th Fighter Group, and he was killed in action the 12th of October 1944. So Dick Vedetta was a P-51 Mustang pilot. His airplane was called the Dirty Gertie, and he was attacked a train near Budapest, Hungary. And when the plane exploded, it sent a bunch of shrapnel in, or when the train exploded, it sent a bunch of shrapnel into his aircraft, and he crashed and was killed. And he entered the service while studying at William and Mary College in Virginia. Next slide. John Miller. So again, a name you may not be familiar with. John was a Hudson resident, and he was a second lieutenant commissioned in March of 44 with the 861st Bombardment Squadron and the 493rd Bombardment Group. He was killed in action the 25th of November 1944. John was a former Hudson resident, and he was a Yale student, so he dropped out of Yale so he could enlist. And he was the pilot of the Proud Pappy, which was a B-17 Flying Fortress shot down over Merseburg, Germany. Next slide. Warren Cunningham, that's on the monument here in town. Technical sergeant, he enlisted in January of 43, the 742nd Bombardment Squadron, the 455th Bombardment Group. He was killed in action in December of 1944. There was a real big push by Bomber Command to make the Germans pay and to end the war. They wanted to end the war as soon as they could. So you'll notice a lot of these dates are right around the holidays. So a lot of families got some really bad news right around the holidays. Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving. That's when a lot of these bombing missions were happening. So Warren was a gunner on a B-24 Liberator, the Glamour Gal. And some of these, I've actually been able to find the pictures, like what they painted on the sides of the aircraft. They really took some pride in that. And he was killed on a bombing mission over Czechoslovakia. Next slide. Alfred Barter, another one of the Berlin men, was a second lieutenant, commissioned in August of 44. The 304th Troop Carrier Squadron and the 442nd Troop Carrier Group. He was killed in action the 6th of April, 1945. So the troop carrier squadrons, the troop carrier groups, these were the planes that would ferry the paratroopers. and ferry the gliders. They would tow a glider behind them, and the glider would release full of troops to go land and fight. The 442nd Troop Carrier Group, they did land paratroopers from Normandy, and they also landed paratroopers at Operation Market Garden. I'm trying to find a little more info about when Alfred was with the unit, but I do believe he was with at least Operation Market Garden. So he was a Berlin resident, but a Hudson High School graduate. He was a C-47 co-pilot, and they were killed in a gasoline resupply mission near Hesse, Germany. What his family believes is that they scrambled the radios, and they gave them like a false signal to fly this way, and they flew right into a mountain. Next slide. Robert Bernard was a second lieutenant commissioned in October of 44 with the 728th Bombardment Squadron, the 452nd Bombardment Group. He was killed in action the 7th of April of 45. He was a B-17 Flying Fortress Navigator and killed on a bombing mission near Kaltenkirchen, Germany. Next slide.
Was he a Hudson boy? Reynard?
So he's on the monument as a Hudson boy, but
Yes, that's a big name.
he graduated from Peters High School over in Southborough. So he was actually the class president for his graduation year, but he has a deep connection to Hudson, yeah? Next slide. So we talk back to the Pacific, 28 October 1944, Operation King II, the Allied landings of the Philippines. A lot more to that with the landings of the Philippines. If anyone's ever been to the Philippines, there's a ton of islands, beautiful people. Next slide. If anyone caught my Chronicle interview, this is Samuel Rosen. His son Eric is the one that I kind of got in touch with for that. So he was a Hudson resident, boatswain mate first class. He enlisted in the reserves in March of 1936, and he was aboard USS Spence. So again, a DD, a destroyer, a couple hundred men, and he was lost in a typhoon 18 December 1944. So Samuel was a former Hudson resident who originally enlisted in the Navy Reserve at 36. USS Spence was lost in a typhoon along with 2 other destroyers off the coast of the Philippines. They were told to head to sea to resupply, to refuel. The Navy has the ability to resupply ships at sea. They don't have to pull into port to get fuel. We can do it at sea. We still can to this day. And they were all told to deballast, get rid of all your extra weight. You're going to get fuel. And then they canceled it. And then they went into a hurricane. So they were all basically floating corks, and all 3 of them capsized. Out of a couple hundred men aboard his ship, only 24 survived. He left behind a wife and a son he had never even met. Next slide. John Kerrigan, private first class, enlisted the 9th of June 1943, the 7th Cavalry Regiment of the 1st Cavalry Division. He was killed in action the 20th of December 1944. John landed on Leyte in the Philippines in October, and he was killed in action in the Limon area of Leyte. Next slide. Arnold Faniff,
Yeah.
private first class. He enlisted 9 June 1943 from newspaper articles. He enlisted with Ernest Perry, who was one of his best friends from Marlborough, and Ernest was also killed in the Philippines. 130 Infantry Regiment of the 43rd Infantry Division. They were both in the same infantry regiment. So you notice here, missing in action, the 25th of January 1945. He was never recovered. His body was never found. I have been in touch with some of his family, and they've been contacted by the government, and they think they may have some ability to recognize, to
Identify.
find it,
Identify.
identify his body. Thank you. So Faniff still noted as missing in action. I have a lot of photos of her here. So he only had one sister, and she was a spinster. She never got married, so there was no nieces and nephews I could get in touch with. But she was a godmother to a woman who was in the Air Force, and she left everything to her godmother. So it was pretty neat. She had all sorts of photos, some great photos of Arnold over here. Next slide. Raymond Fearing was a sergeant listed in September of 42 in the 63rd Field Artillery Regiment of the 24th Infantry Division. He was killed in action the 4th of February 1945. And he participated in fighting on New Guinea and on Leyte in the Philippines. He was killed in action in Luzon. Next slide. So the 16th of December 1944, the last-ditch offensive by the Germans in the Ardennes, known as the Battle of the Bulge. Pretty famous movies about this, and you can do some reading. Next slide. Arthur Ware, private first class, enlisted in June of 43 with the 83rd Armored Reconnaissance Battalion of the 3rd Armored Division. And this is him with his niece. He was killed in action the 23rd of December 1944. So the Germans made that effort to fight right before Christmas. So again, a lot of people were getting some really bad news right around the holidays. Arthur was a Bolton resident, but a Hudson high school class in 1943. He was killed in action while fighting entrenched defensive positions near Hudson in Belgium. Next slide. Francis Donovan was a private first class, enlisted in August of 43, and he served in the 513th Airborne Infantry Regiment, so a paratrooper, with the 17th Airborne Division. He was killed in action the 5th of January 1945. So Francis was an on-call firefighter. His name is on the monument down by the fire department, down towards the other part of town, not the one downtown.
You got a whole bird scanner, right?
Yep. So I have some photos over here. His son actually found a picture of Francis and his wife. I thought that was nice to have. He earned his paratrooper wings in March of 44, and the 17th Airborne was rushed to counter German counterattacks. And he was one of 1,000 casualties that the 17th Airborne Division suffered, defending positions near Bastogne, Belgium. So I think a lot of people saw Band of Brothers, and the 101st Airborne gets a lot of recognition for the defense of Bastogne, but there were a lot of other units that were involved with that. The 10th Armored kind of gets forgotten about completely, but the 10th Armored was in Bastogne with the 101st, the 17th Airborne, and there were other Army units that helped keep the Germans out of there. Next slide. Alfred Lawley, technician, 3rd grade. And this is a picture of him with his wife. He enlisted in January of 42. He served in the medical detachment, the 52nd Armored Infantry Battalion, the 9th Armored Division. He died of wounds in a German prisoner of war camp. He was in a hospital in January of 45. So he was a Maynard resident. He married a Hudson girl, Isabella Katarski. So he was wounded in action. The convoy he was a part of, the medical group was trying to get to the front to help provide medical. I believe he had an arm shot off, and he died in a hospital. And he died of his wounds at PW. He was actually buried in a German church cemetery, and they identified him later on. Next slide. On the 7th of March, 1945, U.S. troops crossed the Rhine River at Remagen. This is actually a picture of the bridge at Remagen. As you can see, if you're trying to fight across a bridge, there's kind of only one way you can go. So we talked about the bridges and the battles before. These are very difficult fights. Next slide. Harold Sarsfield is technician, 5th grade. He enlisted in October of 43. He served in the 244th Combat Engineer Battalion. He was killed in action on the 21st of April of 1945. So the combat engineers were assigned the task of laying mines, repairing roads, and building Bailey bridges to cross rivers. Without engineers, the path of the Allied Army slowed to a crawl. And he was killed in action near Fallersleben, Germany. Next slide. Wallace Gauscher, Jr. was a sergeant. He enlisted in May of 1943, and again, he served in the 18th Infantry Regiment, the 1st Infantry Division. So he didn't fight in as many battles as Ronald Souza, all the way through North Africa. He met the unit in Europe later on. So interestingly enough, he was raised in Hudson, but lived in Marlborough when he enlisted. So he's raised in Hudson, but he's not on the Hudson Monument, but he's on Marlborough's. Again, just things I noticed. Not sure why he wasn't included. He was killed in action in Czechoslovakia. And you'll notice he was killed in action on the 5th of May. Germany surrenders on the 7th of May. So he died 2 days before the German surrender. Next slide. The war didn't end when Germany surrendered. The air offensive over Japan. When we think of the air offensive over Europe, we were targeting ball bearing plants, oil refineries, airplane factories. We weren't targeting population centers, right? The firebombing of Dresden aside, there were many, many places that we bombed knowing that we weren't targeting civilians. The same really can't be said for Japan. They bombed a lot of civilian populations in Japan. The Japanese were fanatical and would not surrender. The thought process was to bomb them, to get them to stop, to surrender. Next slide. Kenneth King, 2nd Lieutenant, was commissioned in April of 43, and he served in the 868 Bombardment Squadron. And he was missing in action, killed in action the 10th of March, 1944. So he was the pilot of the Coral Princess, a B-24 Liberator. The interesting thing about the 868 is they were radar equipped B-24s. They could fly at night, and they didn't need to see anything out the window. They could bomb at night because they had radar. They knew where the Japanese ships were. They knew where the Japanese aerodromes were. These were a nightmare for the Japanese. The Japanese were jungle fighters, and we could bomb them at night, and this was terrible for them. Interestingly enough, when the plane went missing, the gunner on board was from Marlborough. Next slide. Warren Hudson was a sergeant. He enlisted in January of 41 with the 3rd Bombardment Group. He drowned in the 2nd of August, 1944. So Warren was with the headquarters squadron as a ground crewman. So he wasn't one that was flying an aircraft. He was based in New Guinea, and the 3rd Bombardment Group attacked Japanese airfields and shipping. So obviously, boys being boys, or young men being young men, him and his friend grabbed a boat one day and they went paddling out into a lake, trying to have some fun, and a squall came up, and unfortunately it flipped the boat and he couldn't swim. Next slide. Howard Davis Jr. was a 2nd lieutenant, commissioned in October 1943 with the 311th Fighter Squadron and the 58th Fighter Group. He was killed in action the 23rd of January 1945. So another Bolton resident, and he was a Hudson High School class in 1942. He was a P-47 Thunderbolt pilot, and he was shot down near Laguna de Bay off Luzon. So his father was a pastor, and so he lived all over the place. He was born in Martha's Vineyard. He lived in Needham or Newton, I think. Was in Hudson or Bolton for a bit. The interesting thing was I got in touch with his brother, and his brother had a lot of stuff. His brother's still alive out in California. He was married. He was engaged to be married when he was killed. And his fiance, I got in touch with her daughter, and she still had a box of stuff. So we're talking 80 years ago that connection she had with her fiance was so strong that she kept the photos and she remembered him. And I was really happy. So we have a really nice photo of Howard. Next slide. Thomas Daniel was a staff sergeant. Yep.
Daniel.
Yep. So he enlisted the 8th of May 1942. He served in the 398th Bombardment Squadron and the 504th Bombardment Group. He was killed in action on the 29th of May 1945. So Thomas was a gunner on a B-29 Super Fortress. So we go from the B-17 Flying Fortress, a little smaller, to the B-29 Super Fortress. These are some of the biggest aircraft with the biggest payloads that the United States had in the Second World War. And he was shot down over Yokohama, Japan. And he left behind a wife and seven-month-old son he had never met. Next slide. Operation Detachment, February 1945, the Battle of Iwo Jima. Next slide. So James Demaro, ship's cook 3rd class. He enlisted in March of 44, and he served aboard USS Blessman. So just real quick here, DE signifies destroyer escort. So DD was a destroyer escort. We're going from 400 or 500 foot on a destroyer to 200 feet on DD. I served in a patrol craft in the Middle East that was 180 feet. And the minute we left the pier, everyone got seasick. So I can only imagine what these were like. So he was killed in action the 18th of February 1945. So we think of a ship's cook, right? I mean, his job was to cook for the crew. When a ship goes to general quarters, a ship goes to battle stations, everyone has a place that they go. Whether you're in a repair locker to get ready to fight fires, whether you're on a gun crew, manning guns and bringing ammo, down below decks, working, dewatering, ballasting, like those things. So everyone on board a ship, he may have been a cook, but everyone on board a Navy ship fights. He supported operations on Luzon and then supported Underwater Demolition Team 15 off Iwo Jima. So again, the DE, the tiny destroyer, was able to bring in underwater demolition teams. This is your Navy SEALs of World War II. The UDTs, literally before we landed on the beaches, would come off the destroyer escort, paddle a little boat ashore, and blow up mines. And so UDT 15 was attached to the Blessman. And he was killed in action from a direct hit by a Japanese bomber, and he left behind a wife and 2 sons. Next slide. Operation Iceberg, the 1st of April 1945, the invasion of Okinawa. Next slide. So Edgar Cummings, private, enlisted 17 November 1942, and served in the 711th Tank Battalion. He was killed in action the 1st of April 1945. So I found the 711th Tank Battalion, their entire chronology from when they landed in the Philippines to, I mean, I know exactly what boats they took everywhere, and I could not find anything about any men that were killed on the 1st of April. And I'll tell you why. So Edgar Cummings was with the medical detachment. He was killed in action on board the USS Alpine. So the troop transport that brought him to Okinawa was hit by a Japanese bomber. So that's why. And this is where it comes back to those documents that are really important that I'm able to get from the National Archives. They fill in that little piece. And I think that's important to know that part of the story. Next slide. Frank Greska is a private first class in the United States Marines. He enlisted in March of '44, the 29th Marine Regiment of the 6th Marine Division. He was killed in action the 13th of April, 1945. So one of his brothers was actually a prisoner of war of the Japanese. So he landed from the troop ship USS Clay on the northern portion of Okinawa, and that's where the Marines were fighting. When the battle shifted to the south, the Shuri line, Shuri Castle, and many of the things that the Japanese had been working for years and months to put in placements, that's when things really went south on Okinawa. He was wounded in action on the 12th of April and died of those wounds on the 13th. Next slide. So, for my generation, talking about post-traumatic stress disorder is a little bit more open and I think important for people to be able to discuss. And for men from previous generations, I think that was a little bit harder to do. So for Edward Jope, he was a metalsmith first class. He enlisted in May of '42. He's with the 9th Naval Construction Battalion, and he died the 28th of July, 1945. So he committed suicide due to post-traumatic stress disorder directly related to his service, and he left behind a wife and son. I wasn't sure if I really wanted to put that in there, but I think it's important to kind of highlight that is a fact of people's service and post-traumatic stress and things that happen like that. And I don't think it diminishes his service at all. And I'm happy we were able to kind of talk about that. Next slide. So victory on Japan. Victory over Japan, the 14th of August, 1945. They said they surrender on the 14th. They signed the surrender in September. So next slide. So occupation forces and the demobilization. So we have millions of men all around the world, the globe, and we have to bring them home, and we got to make sure they don't bring a bunch of guns with them, and gold and all sorts of stuff, right? So there's more work to be done just because the war is over. We also have to help rebuild Germany, rebuild Japan. We can't just leave these countries destroyed. Sadly, that means that there are accidents that could happen. Next slide. I actually just got this photo in the mail from Lester's nephew, like last week, so I was really happy. Lester Wheeler, technician, 5th grade. He enlisted in December of 1944, and he served in the 301st Signal Operations Battalion. He died in a vehicle accident, 28th of December 1946 in Austria. So Lester was born in Hudson, but raised in Maine, Livermore Falls, Maine. He died in a vehicle accident, part of the occupation troops. So
Was Berlin any relation to him? Was he, because that's a big Berlin name, isn't it?
I didn't find much there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. I did find some documents that said that he also fought in the Pacific. I'm having trouble finding kind of corroborating that. Next slide. Edward Ross is a staff sergeant. He enlisted in October of '42. He served in the 29th Cavalry Regiment. He died of disease in 31 January 1946. So Eddie was another Berlin resident and a Hudson High School class in 1941. For most of the war, if not all of it, he served at Fort Riley, Kansas as an instructor. So with the Cavalry Regiment. And he left behind a wife, a son, and a daughter. Next slide. And Cesar Capone, the corporal. So he enlisted in March of 1946. He served in the 1600 Food Service Squadron, and he died of disease the 3rd of November 1948. So I included him in here just because the selective service, the draft, didn't end until 1947. He served in Germany in 1946 and is at Westover Air Base when he got sick. He was engaged to be married at the time of his death. Next slide. So I will say a soldier's sacrifice is never truly forgotten if we remember to always say their name. It's one thing we do in Marlboro every year. We have a run and we post their photos and we read every name. I think it's important to make sure we just remember their names, remember who they were. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.